Great. Yeah, so let's get started. I mean, people tend to be a bit late for these kind of sessions, don't they? But it's fine. We can just have our conversation or start our conversation anyway. It's a session that we're actually quite excited about. You've seen in the title, we called it Going Beyond the INGO Gaze, Research Collaborations with Local faith actors. And we really mean local actors in general, but then also specifically local faith actors. And yeah, I've already mentioned that we're bringing together two JLI initiatives here. So I know that all of you know who JLI are, but maybe there are people who are going to watch the recording later. So I just quickly, I'll give a brief introduction. JLI stands for Joint Learning Initiative on Faith and Local Communities. And we are an international network of researchers, practitioners, policymakers, community members from across the world who all have an interest in the roles of religion and religious actors in development, humanitarian action, peace building, and just really any type of community work that is aimed at bringing about positive social change. And what we do is we collaboratively identify gaps in the evidence on religion and development, etc. Yeah, then we produce the evidence that is missing, we collate what is there, and we share it. And all of that collaboratively together with people who work on a local level, people who work internationally. Yeah, so in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. And what we're going to do here today is focus on two such projects, and that's the Hidden Peacebuilder project, which is an international research collaboration with researchers and practitioners based in, now let me start from west to east. So we have Brazil, and our colleague Eduardo here is representing Brazil at very early Brazil time today. Then we have colleagues in the UK, and that's Emma Tomlin, who is leading the research grant that we just received to start, no, not to start the research. We have been doing research since 2017, 2018, but to start a new research project on religious actors in peace building. We then have members in East Africa, mostly in Kenya, but also in Uganda, in Burundi. That's our colleague Theo here. And then Asia is also included, colleagues from Sri Lanka and the Philippines. Have I forgotten anyone? I always forget someone. I think that's it. So that's one conflict and religion, conflict, peace, religion focused research project of JLI. And then the other one that we're going to speak about today is the project that Ali and Khadija have been working on with us. So this is some work that we started last year. It was a project that was focused on PVE, PVE as in preventing violent extremism, youth, and religion. And it was a research capacity sharing project where we worked with a group of practitioners and activists from across the world. We had Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, all represented in our group. And the vast majority of the members of the group were not actually researchers themselves. Some had some research experience, but it was relatively at a relatively basic level. And what we then did with the group is that we worked together over a period of several months. And the group received research training, supported each other throughout the process, and then designed and implemented small research projects where they collected data in their own communities, analyzed that, wrote it up, in the form of research reports, research papers, policy papers, storytelling accounts, so quite a wide range of different outputs. And we also had a webinar at the end where we shared both findings in terms of the content, but also insights about this process of collaboratively doing research together. Yeah, and what we're doing in this session now is really quite exciting because we're bringing the two together. What they have in common is obviously the focus on conflict, peace, reconciliation, social cohesion, these kind of questions on the one hand, with a focus on religion in various ways, and then the research aspect, and really the focus on the local, doing research on the local level. That's why we chose this title for our panel, Beyond the INGO Gaze. INGO, obviously international NGOs, because there has been a trend, there has been appreciation of the need for more research on the roles of religion and religious actors in peace and conflict work, but quite often these debates, they are still dominated either by academics or by international NGOs, by big NGOs. And what we are trying to push forward is an approach whereby we actually work more with people from the communities that we're speaking about, right? Like why shall we, if we have people like Ali or Khadija, right? Ali in Pakistan, Khadija in Italy, and they know the communities that they want to do research on, right? Like Khadija, your paper focused on Muslim Moroccan women in Italy. Ali, yours focused on communities in Pakistan, right? Why should we bring in someone? And this is how it usually works, right? Usually, if research should be done on this topic, a big organization and university hires someone, usually from the West, and then that person is, they fly them in to Pakistan, right? They do their research and then they leave again. But why should we do that if we actually have people on the ground, right? Who, yes, might need a little bit of support, right? But then together we can, we can get to a point where actually Ali and his colleagues from his organization, they can do the research themselves. So that's the kind of thinking, right, behind this kind of work. That's the kind of thinking behind the panel. There is obviously quite a few issues related to that, so it's not that straightforward. There's still quite a few challenges and inequalities, power imbalances that you're facing when you're doing this kind of work. But yeah, we're trying to go more towards this direction, and we're trying also to encourage others to try out some of these approaches. So yeah, really excited to hear from Ali, from Khadija, from Theo and Eduardo about this kind of work that you have focused on, either with JLI or obviously you also have other experience in this area, so please don't feel like you can only speak about your JLI experience. We're really looking forward to hearing from you about whatever experiences that are relevant to the panel that you would like to share. Yeah, so what we're going to do in terms of the format of the session is, I'm going to shut up in a minute, I promise. I've already spoken so much and I hope I haven't completely bored Theo, Eduardo, Ali, Khadija, and Emma, because you obviously know all of this, but I'm just thinking of people who might watch the recording later, and I think for them it will be helpful to just have a little bit of context. So apologies to you, because you obviously know all of this. Yeah, but in terms of what we're going to do in the next roughly 1.5 hours, until 1 o'clock UK time, and I'll leave you to do the calculations because I always get confused with all of the time zones. But I know that here in the UK it's going to be 1 o'clock when we finish. What we're going to do is we have a list of questions that we would like to go through, And it's going to be in the style of a roundtable, right? So I'm going to ask the first question, and then, yeah, each one of you can have a few minutes. I think we were saying something like 2 minutes, which is not a lot of time, obviously, but maybe you can just pick highlights, right, of your experience, the most important part, the most important issue. Because if we keep these initial rounds relatively short, then we will also have time for discussion afterwards. Yeah, I mean, we can have discussion with the audience if more people join us, or we can even have a discussion amongst ourselves, because obviously Eduardo and Theo, you know each other from the Hidden Peacebuilders project. Khadija and Ali, you know each other from the PVE project and now from the JLI Conflict Hub. But actually, we have not really linked these two projects together a lot yet. So I'm wondering if this might also just be interesting for us, right, to have a conversation, because we're going beyond the INGO gaze, but we're also going beyond the gaze of everyone else. We center and prioritize our own interests and agendas, right? Yeah, so that's also something we can do, right, if we're interested in it. But let's just get started and see how it goes. We have this time for us, so we can also be a bit flexible and see what we want to do. Okay. All right. So let me have a look at the questions. So the first question that we have on the list here is about research priorities. And what we thought, and when I say we, so I co-organized the panel with Emma was involved, and then Kati Kraft as well from World Vision and the University of East London. She also helped put the session together, and I know we also got input from some of, I think, from the Hidden Peacebuilders colleagues. We also shared the session outlines with you guys. So the first question that we thought we might be interesting for people is about research priorities. And we'd really love to hear from all of you about if we have priorities of international NGOs on the one hand, and then on the other hand, research priorities of research priorities like evidence needs, right, of the communities that you work with. Okay, we're interested in the differences between the two. Are there any differences? Are people interested in the same kind of questions? Is there a need for evidence, for knowledge to be produced, to be shared on the same kind of questions, or is there gaps between the two? Yeah, so that's the question. We have the 4 speakers here. Theo, obviously, our colleague from Burundi, from the organization REMA. Eduardo from Brazil, and I wrote down the name of the university because I don't speak Portuguese. It's so long. The name is so long, Eduardo. Honestly,
I can speak it when it's my turn.
You want to say?
I mean, I can say with the proper accent, so you can.
That's the thing. I mean, I kind of want to try it out. I kind of want to. I don't speak any of these. Like, I don't speak Spanish or Italian. I feel they have a similar way of like, right? I don't, but I'm going to try now, and it's going to be recorded and it will be shared with the whole world, and they will all laugh at my accent. So, Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul. Something like that. Close, right? Close. I think I get points for trying, at least. So that's Eduardo. And then we have Khadija, who's a social worker in Italy. And that's really her being very modest because she's involved in a lot of other things as well. But that's what you put. And you always have to choose something, right, to put on these forms. What's your affiliation? Like, oh my God, I can't put everything I do on like a form like that. But yeah, for the purpose, yeah, of what we're doing here, social worker. And then Ali is part of the organization I don't actually know how you pronounce it. Do you say HI voices or do you say high voices?
So you say high voices, like humanitarian voices. So.
Yeah, amazing. So that's Ali's organization in Pakistan. Yeah, and that's basic introductions done. I'm Jennifer. I didn't even introduce myself. I just went straight into it. Jennifer from the JLI. I already explained what that means, what that stands for, and I'm senior research fellow at the JLI. And yeah, so we have the question, the research priorities of INGO and the priorities of communities that you work with, that you're part of. Is there overlap? Are there differences? Is there a gap? What is the situation? I don't know. Does anyone want to start or shall I pick someone? I'm going to pick someone.
I can be the second. I can be the second.
No, Eduardo, that's not how it works. You just unmuted yourself. You spoke. You showed us that you can speak. Go for it. The others, they can pretend they're still looking for the unmute button, but you know how to do it, so you'll have to speak now.
It's just that I feel that I will probably be able. I don't know if we are going to make this more like a conversation. I can come back to it after the others have spoken on the same question. So I feel that should improve our possibility of changing perspectives here. So I'm going to be quick. So you said the name quite well. Just a little bit of accent, but that was expected. Very clear German accent. But it's Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul, and it's a long name because we have federal universities, so we have to say the state name, and the state name is big. So, I do think there are a lot of overlaps, so I'm going to start with that. But there are also significant distinctions, differences between the priorities. I don't know how to put that specifically, but usually in these very local experiences, you have a variety of priorities that depend on the experience of that community. So when we are dealing with an international organization, you usually get a more general priority. You have something that is usually common to different places that can be tackled in different countries, in different which have different histories and different problems. So something that can be discussed in Brazil, but also in Burundi, but also in Sri Lanka, Philippines. But sometimes when we change for this to a local organization, they have something that comes out of the specific historical context of that place. And here in Brazil, one of the places that I have been doing research with, and it's a kind of Black community inside of more and poor Black community inside of a more large white middle class neighborhood. So they are kind of ghetto inside of that neighborhood, and is a place that have a very strong dispute over drug trafficking factions. So you have a lot of violence because it is a ghetto inside of a more white middle-class neighborhood, and it's a very good distribution point for drug traffickers. So there is a specific history that is connected with things that are very specific to that situation. It's because it's in that location, and it has that particular history, and has these and that particular violence problems that are not exactly the same. We can see these as something related to urban violence, to racial problems, to poverty and inequality. We can make these very specific local concerns into more general, broad, and abstract terms. And I think that this kind of passage from something that is very specific and local to something that is more general and abstract and formal is the difference between what we are dealing with. So in my specific case, there is this concern with violence related to drug trafficking, related to racism, related to poverty and inequality. So you have very specific set of questions, but this can also be seen from an international organization as something that happens in other places and other. So I would start with that.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. So it's basically about global issues, right? Or I mean, not even global issues, maybe, but issues that are perceived or considered to be global, right? And that international organization, I think academics, they also do the same, right? They have big topics that they are interested in, and then they do international research projects like the Hidden Peacebuilder project, right? And look at them, but then obviously in the specific context, you may find something that you can subsume under this big topic, but it might actually play out in very different ways depending on the context, right? Yeah, that's really interesting. Ali, is this your experience as well, or do you have any other comments to share about this question?
I think in terms of what can be different to the INGOs and the local communities is that sometimes it's when we say we are doing this research for the facts we wanted to know, but what happens that the facts interpretation for outside or the INGOs might be different from the what are the results or the interpretation of the results on the ground. That is what I observed during our work. For instance, when we are trying to do some research related to minorities issues in Pakistan, but when the results come out, the things that an INGO wanted to go ahead with further work, the way they interpret is like, for instance, might be in a very positive way, but for the on the ground, the community and the other aspects interpret that results like somehow they are being targeted, that they are not providing minorities their rights or something. So I think that's an aspect from my side that we observe during our work as well, and that's that not only just one is this thing is about having sensitive questions and other things, but it's about how you interpret later on. The local communities not only just might be the local communities, but might the local stakeholders also interpret those results in a different ways. Also, one more aspect I wanted to share in regards to this question is that the way when local NGOs interact for different kinds of research on ground, the approach, even you have someone flying and learning how to interact with the local communities, being in the immersive way, is somehow a bit different for when you have someone or the local organization or the local persons interacting and getting those facts, because the way it creates the trust level among people and the local organization on ground that are already working, might be for many years, but if even they are new, so the interaction and the trust level also puts how community or even the community is prepared for those research findings or to utilize it, or the stakeholders, even those are the local governments, university or academia, are those wanted to utilize those research for the betterment of their society in the similar way that is interpreted by the INGO or the larger global stakeholders that interpret or conducted us. I think that is what I observe, because it happens when we try to represent results for our work. The way it was taken or absorbed globally was different from what it was absorbed or taken on the ground. In both ways, I won't say that on the ground it was negative or globally it was positive, but it can be both ways from both directions. So that's just input from my side. In terms of what Adoro just said, yeah, it can be these. Yeah, I think that's also something that that we need to look, and I would also agree with some of those points. But that's from, I think that is something for now from my side. But if something comes up, I will raise my hand to put some more information.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Ali. No, that's so interesting. And I think it kind of, what you just said, it kind of challenges this assumption that is still so widespread amongst academics, but also some of these big organizations, right? These international NGOs, who sometimes seem to think that they are neutral, right? And they somehow, they're somehow like, so yeah, somewhere in the air, they are very neutral. They can just go into any context, right? Produce any research.
I won't take one side, because yeah, it can be different for on the ground and other things. Sometimes it can be actually a good thing that the local community need to understand, but yeah, it works for both ways. So that is, I think we need to, that's a bit challenging. Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We said we want a conversation, right? No, okay, that's interesting. So I read this, it reminded me of some of these, yeah, it's basically how a lot of academics and people who work in usually Western big NGOs, right? How they perceive themselves. But of course, no, your point is very valid, of saying that it goes both ways, and probably not just both ways, but like multiple ways, and it's very complex, right? With lots of people engaging with these questions in different ways. Okay, interesting. Really, I love this. I love this. It's great discussion so far. So I don't know, Khadija, do you want to go next?
Sure. Can you hear me? I hope yes. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Ms. Jennifer, for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here among you. I'm Khadija Tirha. I'm Moroccan by origin. I'm Italian by citizenship. I'm a global citizen. I'm also consider myself as an Afro-European because I was born in Morocco and raised in Italy. Back to the question, I wanted to emphasize to the global dimension that NGO has, because sometimes when we're talking about NGOs, we should really keep in mind that most of the NGOs use a global approach when they conduct research, comparing the local communities. And sometimes this global approach is definitely good, but when we are talking about local communities, the local communities used to work with a short-term goals, because sometimes they have a lack of resources, lack of funds, and they dream to have a global goals, but unfortunately they can't. So they used to work locally, and they have a global dimension, but in order to work efficiently, it's better to work with a short goals, short objectives. And I think the biggest difference, from my opinion, is a global dimension. When we are talking about dimension, there is a huge difference, not gap, because I don't think it's bad to have a short vision or a long vision, but we should really consider the dimension in these terms. And regarding my own experience, I worked as a researcher during my academic path, and I worked for a welcoming project with the Syrian refugees in my community. And I realized how it's very hard to share our project nationally. I mean, locally, we can share our project. We did a good work as a raising awareness on a welcoming refugees, on a help them to be part of our society. But nationally, it was very hard to raise awareness on this issue, because we are facing a lot of problems, a lot of challenges in Italy as a country, especially on when we are talking about migration, because we welcome a lot of refugees, but we always talk about the bad things. We should really emphasize on the good practice. We have a lot of good experience. We have a lot of good project, but I don't know why we always put the attention to the bad things when someone did a good wrong. Mass media wanted to underline someone did this stuff, and we don't want to put attention on the good practice. So there is also lack of communication between a local context and a national context in my own country, of course, Italy.
Yeah. Thank you, Khadija. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I feel like quite often when we're having these debates, like people usually speak about the local and the international, but then there is obviously also, there's more to that, right? Sometimes there is also, people mention national, but that's less so the case, I feel. And quite often it then gets lumped together, right? And we speak about local and national on the one hand and international on the other. And I mean, apart from the fact that a lot of these terms and concepts are really flawed, because what makes someone a local actor, right? What makes someone an international actor? Like, you can be, like, if you take refugees, for example, right? That, like, from Syria, that might be living in Italy, and you could then say, we work with them, so we are local actors, but you might also have connections with people in other parts of the world who also work with refugees. The refugees have connections that cross borders, right? So does that make them local, international? Like, I feel, right?
Yeah. Indeed, yeah. we can stay locally, having a global dimension, but we don't need to consider our work all the time global. I mean, it's not necessary to say that we are global, we think global, because sometimes we think global without knowing that we have a global perspective. That's why.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's so interesting. And I also really liked what you said before about the short-term goals, right? As compared to more long-term or global goals. And that's something that I've also often encountered in my work with people who you would call local practitioners, right? We were doing research with them similar to the work that we have been doing with you guys in the PVE Hub, in the PVE project, and now in the Conflict Hub. And there was, when we worked in group with academics on the one hand, and then practitioners from these small grassroots organizations on the other, there was often a tension, right? Because they had different timelines that they were working with, and different, like the scope of what was possible and what was, useful, right? Necessary was often quite different. Yeah. Okay, Theo, last but certainly not least.
Thank you very much. I'm happy just not to repeat what others have said, which is very valid. In my experience, I think the international community wants really to understand issues of policies and how they work and how they do not work, issues of comparative studies from different contexts. But really, when you go to do research in a local community, these people are struggling with real issues, and they really want to understand what works and what doesn't work. I mean, they want solutions to their problems, and really you want to understand the drives for success and what is really practical and what works. And so one of the things, for example, that we have been dealing with has been the place of faith in peace building and reconciliation. These are some of the things that probably NGOs don't want to think about, but a country like Burundi, which has been having many refugees for a long time, going and coming back on several occasions and being hurt in many different ways, how do they cope? I mean, it might be easy to come up with international coping mechanisms, but very locally, how can Burundians survive all these episodes of wars and atrocities? And you realize that religion has got a big place to play, which probably many people are not wanting to explore because it is, first of all, difficult, hard to capture, hard to understand, hard to quantify. But it's real to local communities. You can't talk to them before they talk to you for a long, before they talk to you about their religious experience and how God protected them. And it's not, they don't necessarily always speak of things that, you know, policies and everything. They speak of miracles and how they survive. They speak of prayers. And I think these aspects of religion, of course, sometimes religion also is a drive to conflict. But generally speaking, it has sustained community all along, but it hasn't been really well understood how it contributed and how it can be built on, actually, to build more reconciled communities and more peaceful communities. And I think international international organizations haven't really thought a lot on that. And when it is a matter of life and death for local people and the local communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Theo. That's really interesting. And yeah, thank you for bringing the question of faith, right, back to the center of the discussion that we're having here. I mean, I think this this dichotomy between policy solution focused approaches, right, by a lot of the international NGOs and international organizations on the one hand, but then faith-based approaches where it is no policy solution as such, right, but it was God who protected people. I think that's really interesting and really important for people to become more aware of that, right, because a lot of these international discussions, they're just so they're quite exclusive of faith perspectives, right, and they're just so secular to an extent where people are even afraid just to mention things like that, right? Okay, shall we move to the next question, the one about methodologies? Is that okay? I mean, let me just read the question, and then if there's anything that you wanted to yeah, that you wanted to connect to what we have discussed so far, then please feel free to do that. And maybe this time we'll start with Theo, because I feel it has already come up a little bit in your in your previous intervention just now, right, Theo? When you said that when it comes to faith, then it's just sometimes it's difficult to quantify it, right? And I think that that does really apply to, I mean, it's probably applied to a lot of work that you're doing with communities, maybe even beyond that, and people are just not ready to admit it. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you what your thoughts, your perspectives, your experience are. The question is, what methodologies work well for doing research with the communities that you work with or that you're part of? Yeah, Theo, do you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you very much. Obviously, I think the first biggest methodology that we use is qualitative research, and basically we use action research. Action research is really when you implement a project that meets people's needs, and you try at the same time to learn what works and what doesn't work and what are the drives. So you reflect, but really this is very good to people, because people see that you work together with them and you try to understand what they are doing and you try to meet their real needs, rather than coming and asking them questions and going and they don't know where you are taking the data and how it is going to help them. Obviously, working with people-based institutions to reach out and get relevant information and people's experience is very helpful. And such community-based institutions, researching with them, because they become a research team in this action research, are religious institutions. They have been there for a long time. They will be there after, and they have a deep and great understanding of what's going on. So religious institutions are probably the longest and the most relevant institutions to people, more trusted. I mean, if you want to understand people, you want a methodology that will bring out a clear understanding on what people are going through. So trust, obviously, is very important. And personally, I don't know anybody that people, especially in my context, trust than religious leaders. They are trusted, and so people can open up to them and they can talk with you. And but also when you think about what you do with the research which you come up with, it can be very easily owned up at contextual level, at local level, and it can survive beyond the researcher's intervention even after you've lost, because you've worked with truly locally based institutions like religious institutions. Just to leave, let me leave others to add.
Great, thank you, Theo. Others, does anyone want to come in? I mean, some really good points here by Theo about focus on qualitative research, action research, and working with religious institutions. Theo, Eduardo, you look like you're having some deep thoughts there. So I just volunteer you.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Theo, Ali, Khadija, for the contribution in the last question. I was taking notes here, and I really agree with a lot of things that you said, and made me think that if I had thought properly, I could also say things that you also said that I agree with when it comes to the experience I have. So thank you for that as well. I'm a social anthropologist, so it is my duty to say that I do think that doing field work and ethnography is a very good way of understanding these communities. And I really do think so. It's not just because it's my duty to say so. And by doing ethnography or field work in this anthropological sense means something that is very easy to be done by others, not just by social anthropologists. That is living in the community and experiencing the routine, the ordinary, everyday life and life and experience that those people have. Or at least being there very often, if not living in the place, if it's impossible. So I believe that this is something that can really help in terms of methodology to understand these local communities, to understand this daily life. Also, we are preparing a more quantitative research to be done with a questionnaire to have a form to be filled by people from the community. And this is something that also is interesting because this is something that we are beginning to do there on request of the local faith actor. So it's not something that was initially designed by my research, but it's something that has a mutual interest. So the point for them is also they some religious differences in the community. So because it's a Catholic action, so they want to understand more about those who are Pentecostal or evangelicals or from African, Brazilian religions. So they want to have a more distinct profile of the community, and so this is something that we are also starting to do there, that mixes my research interest and theirs. So there's a kind of mixture of more qualitative and quantitative methodologies that I think can be very useful for all those involved, not just for the local faith actor or for those who are coming from outside and want to understand the experience that people have there. But I want quickly to return to the last question and say that Theo placed faith in the foreground of the priorities, and I think that I should have said that as well, but I was trying to think of the differences in other terms. So in also Khadija said that the short-term goals that I also agree with, because maybe one way of putting, sorry to go back to the last question, but one way of putting that is that they are there's a specificity to that experience. So they are concerned with the kids being able to get out of their houses and going to school. And that's one way of framing the question that I framed in terms of urban violence and drug trafficking, disputes of the territory, or other aspects. So the fact that sometimes you go weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks, and kids inside the house because they are afraid to step out and go to the street that they live. So this kind of short-term goals, I think it's also very important there. And so just to go back to that. And returning to the methodology, I would say those two. I think it's important to understand the ordinary daily life, and also to understand what the local faith actor wants to know, and maybe they don't know, they don't have the capacity to build that kind of research to know something, and then I'm helping to do that. So that's it.
Great, thank you, Eduardo. A case for anthropological approaches whereby you like really either immerse yourself into the community, or maybe you're already part of the community, right? Because you're researching your own community. But then also, yeah, maybe there's also space for mixed methods, right? As you just mentioned, especially when there is a request for that from some of your research participants or research partners. So yeah, I think that actually links quite nicely to the first question, right, of the research priorities. Yeah, totally hear your points about the first question, and don't apologize. We said this is our panel, our rules, right? So if any of you remember something that came up at an earlier part of the discussion, like don't feel bound by these questions. We can jump and you can come in, or that's absolutely fine. Okay, so going back to the question of methodologies and methodologies that work for the research that you're doing with your communities or the communities that you work with. I don't know, Ali, do you want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think to the discussion that's coming up, that the qualitative research has been proved to be something very helpful. Yeah, I think that is something my experiences on the ground as well. Also, I think the more good way, because of the diversity in the world and the diversity within the religious research and the people we wanted to get out factors is so much that that we think that immersive ways of doing research is the best way to kind of getting out the right facts. That's also links with the qualitative way, qualitative research. So I think that is in terms of the methodologies, from my experience, because of the so much diversity and the way we collect data from different faith actors, I think the immersive way is good. And also in terms of the balance, here we need to understand when depending on the research, when we try to include multiple faith actors, the outcome facts can be very different based on what populations we are interacting more. Just give you an example, when we were trying to include youth as our focus group around the influence of religious and curriculum, we found that because of the large imbalance within the population, having like 80 to 90% Muslim young people with very smaller number of young people from other religious minorities, the data results that we wanted to we get and later on that will be used also has influence of those this contributions from what target population of youth we are wanted to. So I think simply in simple words, I would say it's very critical because of the diversity in the local community So we need to be more into terms of immersive way and doing the qualitative research. That's a little bit of the summarize what we learned.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ali, for raising, I mean, especially for raising these points, and especially the point about diversity. I mean, that's so important, right? And we do know that there is often, when people speak about engaging with faith actors, they often have a more traditional approach in mind, right? Whereby they then want to engage with religious institutions and formal faith leaders. And obviously there is, in lots of contexts, there's going to be, yeah, this is going to make sense. But then, yeah, there obviously also needs to be space to work with diverse faith actors and across religions, as you mentioned, right, Ali? So being appreciative of religious diversity in a specific space, the inequalities that often come with that, right? Existing tensions and dynamics between and within groups as well, right? Like I feel sometimes we speak about, yeah, we need to include faith actors and yeah, and then there's a very simplistic way of approaching that, because even if we say we want to work with Muslim faith actors in a specific context, right? There's differences even there. Like, what do you mean? Do you mean Shia? Do you mean Sunni? Do you mean, right, like from a specific background? Do you mean elite actors? Do you mean people from socioeconomically marginalized backgrounds? Do you mean poor people? Do you mean people in the cities, rural? I mean, I could go on for another 10 minutes and listing all of these, nuances of diversity that are often just like, you just put them in one pot and they're all faith actors, right? Yeah, Khadija is smiling and nodding along. Hi, Khadija. What do you think?
I wanted to say that Ali, he's mentioned one of the methodology that I really appreciate, and I think it's really useful to understand some aspects when we are talking about local communities, which is the focus group. I'm a focus group lover. I used to do it as a participant and also as an organizer. And I think that using the focus group can really help us as a researcher to understand better some issues, and also to cover new aspects and information that sometimes it's hard to even remember or underline when we want to analyze a specific things. The second methodology is for sure storytelling approach. Since in our research, I decided to use it, this specific tool, because I think that using the storytelling can really help others to trust you, because you put yourself in a condition where you are a listener. So you are there to listen their story without judging their story, their path, their struggle. So in this sense, they trust you because you want to listen them. So you start your research giving them trust. After that, you give them space, because when I conduct my research regarding the far-right party in Italy, I realized how it's really powerful to use this tool, because in my case, no one asked them, what do you think about the far-right party in Italy? As a Muslim woman, what are your struggles, your challenges? What are your thoughts? We are simply talking about opinions, perspective. We are not talking about huge things. We want to change our society. No, we are talking about thoughts and perspectives. So when you value people as an individual, as a human being, as a citizens, through the storytelling, you can really found new things, new aspects that in a normal research or a quantitative research, you can really reach, because you will talk about numbers, percentage, without explaining why this person act in this way. You can really give a huge response regarding the actions of people through the storytelling approach.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for highlighting that, Khadija. And I think it's so interesting because obviously the project that you refer to, right, the research that you refer to, where you interviewed Muslim women in Italy about their views of the far right and how the far right, the rise of the far right in Italy, how that is affecting them. That's the research that you conducted as part of the PVE project with JLI that we mentioned, just for context for people who are not familiar with the project. So you actually conducted that as part of the of that project, and I still remember how that all came up, because we were in the session with all the other participants and brainstorming ideas, and I still remember how you were a bit like, oh, I don't know, what shall I focus on, right? And then yeah,
I was even scared to ask them, what do you think about the far right party? Because
yeah,
it's a sensitive topic. Some people are afraid to talk about politics because maybe they will be reported by some politician, but our prime minister. So it was hard even for me to explain that my research has only, the only goal is to understand better these aspects. I don't want to report you to our government or to put you in a dangerous situation. I won't use your real name. So I really explain different things in order to receive their trust and to build a connection between me and them.
Yeah, exactly. And that, again, I mean, that really that points to these issues of of existing tensions, right, of inequalities that do exist, and we can't just as I don't know, an international NGO researcher or an academic who's not familiar with the context, we can't just go into a context and then expect, right, for this research to take place in a vacuum, basically, because all of these issues that you may not actually be aware of, right, and very familiar with, if you are not part of the community or if you don't have very strong links with them, right? Yeah, it can actually be a really big issue. And then I guess the other thing that I also found really interesting about your research was that the project focused on PVE, preventing violent extremism. And this is not always, like, in lots of international NGO spaces. I know that when we speak about PVE, people think about PVE projects in Kenya and in Jordan and in Lebanon, right? But to actually then take these conversations to Italy.
Thanks. We are not facing terroristic things or this kind of huge problems. But when we are talking about violent extremism, we can decline the violent extremism, also talking about the right party. It's a kind of violence. They use a different violence, but it's violence. It's extremism. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I guess this is also something that you can gain from engaging with local perspectives. So there's questioning some of these terminologies that we use. And I mean, you just said in Italy, we don't have any big issues with terrorist violence, but I think we could even question that, because there have been violent attacks on minoritized groups, on marginalized groups, right? On Muslims, on Black people. So, you know, like, and this is something that you do not often get from INGO discussions. It's often missing. Okay, have we heard from everyone? I think so, yes. So really happy to see that Kati has joined us. Kati is also a long-time JLI member and colleague. She works with World Vision International, obviously also an international development organization, but she also has an affiliation with University of East London. So she's kind of like sitting on both chairs or jumping from one to the other. And she's also one of the people who organized the panel with us together, and also one of the hidden peace builders, people. Now we have less than half an hour left, but 2 more panel questions. And I said at the beginning, this is our panel. We can run this in the way that we want to. The 2 questions, let me just take a quick peek. So there is one about concepts and terminology. So differences between what concepts people refer to, what terminology they use when they speak about peace, conflict, and faith. I feel this, we've already kind of touched on that a little bit just now, right? And also throughout the conversation before. So that's one question we could focus on. The other question would be about what do you want, right? And I think we wrote this question with our platform here in mind, right? So the session is obviously being recorded. It's going to be on the PeaceCon website. And I mean, we all know that PeaceCon is attended by a lot of people from international NGOs, by policymakers, by people who work with donor organizations, right? So we felt that this is kind of our opportunity to basically put some suggestions, to give some feedback to them. And I don't know, you let me know what you think, but I kind of would love to take that question for the next 20 something minutes as just some concrete takeaway points. So, okay, we've discussed the issues, we've discussed some of the opportunities. In the end, a lot of this is not going to happen if we don't get the funding for it, right? I mean, let's be real here. Okay. So what do you want? What do you want from big funders, big organizations? Are you okay for us to focus on that question? I mean, obviously, we can also speak about the other one, or you can mix, you can, like we did before, you just bring in various points, go back to what we discussed before, but maybe, yeah, if someone from, I don't know, USAID or from some of the big foundations in our line of work, they're watching this now. What should they do differently? What should they do more? What should they do less?
Can I say something? Yeah, I think for me, I would like the donor organizations to open up to, maybe have less stereotypes towards faith actors, and realize that actually even probably some of the claims of success we've been having and the claiming have probably been thanks to local faith actors who have been playing from the background. And so if you as donors, donor community, if they want to open up to new way of understanding things and doing things as proposed by faith actors, I would think they will have to understand some of their terminology. It's not witchcraft. It's just something that one needs to understand and maybe repackage differently the calls and the calls for funding, and then have probably platforms like these ones where researchers like us and the practitioners could meet and talk and learn, and then learn as well. And so I think this would show how much how much faith actors are actually contributing towards peace building and even other things. And then this way it would actually open up for donors to consider these kinds of projects. Yeah.
Okay, some very valid points here from Theo, encouraging donors to basically consider their own biases, right? And against faith actors and be open to learning and understanding different actors, different approaches, and then providing platforms like this one here for learning and for exchange between various people from various backgrounds. Yeah, I don't know who would like to go next. Khadija, do you want to maybe share your thoughts?
I wanted to say one thing that maybe it can be, how can I say, utopic, but it should be really like that, according to my opinion. I wanted to ask the donor organization to go physically to the local community. I know they don't have time, but if they want, they will find time. Because giving money, giving funds, okay, it's completely okay, but going there physically, seeing with their own eyes, touching the problems, the challenges, it's completely different. From my view, it's completely different. And also it can really enhance the relationship between grassroots organization, local community, and big funds, big funders, big donors. I mean, I don't want to say that they don't do their work in a good way, but sometimes it's a bit superficial to give money, to give some help without going there, seeing with their eyes, touching the real problem. I mean, sometimes I feel that there is a kind of superficiality in helping others. We should really put in the center of our work the human being. I mean, the emotional side. You know, this is what I really wanted to see in my own context, to see the big donor going to my city, to my community, talking with people, creating some gathering with people, just to hear them. What are their needs? What they want to change? What are the things that they need in order to make a change in their own community? It seems it can be like a simple, a stupid things, but I think that the effect, the impact on the people are very high when you value people as a human being, not as a numbers, you know. Thank you.
Great, yeah, thank you, Khadija. I really like this, and you said it might be utopic, but to be honest, if we don't dare to think outside of the box, what's the point, really, right? I mean, if we always just like, if we stay within the constraints of being realistic, I mean, are we ever going to change anything? So no, let's be bold, but let's be utopic. Let's imagine things as we would like them to be. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Let's go to let's go to communities. Let's see where what is happening on the ground, right? Center and value human experiences, and hear from people. And let's also not be afraid of pointing out issues, right? And it's actually, I mean, it's kind of sad that we have to be careful sometimes how we say things, right? Like, oh, right, like when you said that, yeah, I'm not sure if I should call this superficial, but sometimes it is superficial, and then maybe we also need to say it. And if you're a donor and you're genuine about the work that you're doing, then maybe it's also time to acknowledge that and be like, okay, I got some feedback here that maybe I didn't want to hear, but if I'm genuine about wanting to work with people and change things, and I need to be ready, like I need to be ready even for the uncomfortable feedback, right?
Let's say that sometimes formality, it's completely required. It's completely okay. But let's be formal for a while, okay? Just to understand different aspects, you know? I mean, when I said superficial, I know that it's a huge word, but I feel that in some donors really they don't want to be informal in that sense, because they're afraid to lose their power, their status. That's why they wanted to maintain a distance between them and the local community, because it should be like that. It was always used to do like that, so we should continue in that sense. Let's break the rules in this way. Okay, let's change something. So I think changing some rules can really benefit all of us. It can really give us a wide perspective in order to grow together.
Yeah, beautifully said, Khadija, beautifully said. And I mean, if people take offense when hearing the term superficial, then okay, let's just say you're not going as deeply as you could. You're not going as far as you could. We are not going as deeply. We are not going as far. Can we change that? Are you ready? You're ready for the ride? Join us. Okay, Eduardo, you're smiling. Are you amused by us? Do you agree?
No, I agree very strongly with what have been said. So I don't know if I can put it in a nicer or better way or add something to what they have said, because I'm really agreeing and in absolute agreement here with them. I think those are very important things, and we need to see that changing and being addressed in this kind of situations. What I find interesting is that I see a difference between my experience here and those in the sense that I don't sense, but maybe that's my mistake, so strongly how people get these political or political sensibilities or some aspects can be a way of conflict between these perspectives on what is important, on what gets prioritized. And that's not exactly the experience I have here, but that might be something that I haven't noticed and really is as important here as it is in other contexts. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it might be that, right? Because if we say that context shapes experiences, right, and shapes situations that affect people, then that it can also have this effect, right? It can literally.
What I'm probably trying to say is that maybe here people can talk more freely, and so that does not happen in the same way that happens in other places, and then or at least we do speak more freely, and even if we shouldn't. So I agree with them, because I hope these kind of things can be done.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Eduardo. I just got a message from Dani, our volunteer who's helping us, that we're past 3 minutes past the schedule. And I didn't realize that. I thought we had another 10 minutes. So let's maybe quickly go to Ali, because we also want Ali's wish list, obviously, for the donors who might be watching us, or big INGOs. Please, Ali, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I will agree with some of the conversation that Khadija said, but we'll try to summarize it in the way that is not just about the innovative new ideas, but might be kind of a supporting the new youth-led researchers in their research or the innovative research they wanted to do. The donors should do that. And also, with my experience, I think the donors should also start supporting some of the wild ideas in terms of linking peace with other aspects. For instance, for our group, we are also working on the health aspect on the ground for some community. And for instance, in Pakistan, we have seen violence towards health workers in the conflict area. So I see some donors are supporting the programs they are doing on health to link them with faith actors, because on the ground, faith actors does not only influence the peace or the conflict, but also some others linked areas. For instance, health, the way, for instance, in the case of COVID-19, how faith actors not contributed towards issues, how people view towards COVID. So I think it will be good for the already working people or groups and to the donors to also looking how peace building efforts are linked, and how those different new interventions that links peace with other issues around in the community, and how those are influenced. They should also start spending some money on those, because in which way you are not just getting one benefit, but from both sides. And also it is because sometimes donors have their own priorities. For instance, if they wanted to invest in the health related, so they if linked up with those programs, so that's also covers their priorities and also supports those innovative ideas. So just this point from myself.
Yeah, thank you, Ali. And that's a really good point, right? Like basically a call for more intersectional approaches, more interconnected, right, approaches, because the issues that we are facing, they are intersectional and they are interconnected. So if we want to work towards addressing them, obviously our approaches have to do the same. Otherwise, right, we're just not going to get very far. Great, thank you so much. Apologies to Dani. I honestly didn't realize. I thought we had until had another 7 minutes, but we don't, and we're 8 minutes, 9 minutes now behind schedule. So really sorry about that. Massive thank you to Ali, Eduardo, Khadija, and Theo. Yeah, you've been amazing, and this has been such an interesting discussion. Yeah, thanks to Dani for being in the background and making sure that things go smoothly, and obviously to Emma and Kati, who we organized the session with, and our member here in the audience. Thanks for joining us. Hello to everyone who's going to watch us later on the recording. Hi. Thanks for watching, and yeah, we hope you find it beneficial to be in touch. You'll find us all online if you look for our names, if you look for our organizations. We'd love to hear from you. If you agree with what we've said, you have any new ideas, you're a donor, you want to work with us, be in touch. We'd love to hear from you.